Sarah had finally found peace. After years of trauma, heartbreak, and painful self-reflection, she believed she had rebuilt her life. Her days were now calm, filled with routine, and she had found stability in the arms of Jake, her loving boyfriend. He was kind, understanding, and everything she had ever dreamed of in a partner. But as she gazed at a photo of him that night, something deep within her stirred, a lingering discomfort she couldn't shake. The picture, taken years before, seemed innocent enough, but as Sarah stared at it, something caught her eye. At first, it was subtle. A small figure in the background, just a glimpse of a child. But that figure soon transformed into a chilling reality that froze Sarah in place. The child, barely visible but unmistakable, was Adam, her son. The son she had abandoned beneath a bridge all those years ago when she was a teenager, lost in a sea of hopelessness. How could he be in Jake's life? How had she never known? The ground seemed to shift beneath her as memories flooded back. Sarah's teenage years were a blur of pain and mistakes, one of the darkest chapters of her life. A scared young girl with no family to support her, pregnant and alone, forced to make an impossible decision. She had been desperate, incapable of seeing any other way. With no one to turn to, she had abandoned Adam, leaving him on the cold pavement under a bridge. It was the worst decision of her life, one she had never forgiven herself for, and now, staring at that photo, it was as if the past had come crashing back. She had buried her shame deep, hidden it beneath layers of time, but now it was impossible to ignore. Jake had no idea, of course. He couldn't know the truth. No one could. But seeing Adam's face, even for a brief moment, forced Sarah to confront the horrors of her past once again. Her mind raced, her chest tightened. What had happened to Adam? Where had he gone after she left him there? Had he been okay? Was he alive? Was he happy? Did he ever wonder about the woman who had given him life and then abandoned him without a second thought? The photo seemed like a cruel reminder that she couldn't escape her past. No matter how far she had come, no matter how much she had built, that part of her would always remain, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. She tried to push the feeling away, to convince herself it was just a coincidence, that maybe it wasn't Adam. But deep down she knew it was him. There was no mistaking it. The next few days were a blur of confusion and dread. Sarah's mind wouldn't stop racing. She tried to focus on her work, on Jake, on the life she had finally managed to build for herself, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw that picture. Every time she looked at Jake, a weight pressed on her chest. She couldn't stop thinking about Adam, about the boy she had left behind. Her distance from Jake became more apparent. He noticed the change in her behavior, the tension in her voice, the way she avoided looking at him directly. He tried to reach out to ask what was wrong, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell him. How could she? How could she admit to the one man she loved the truth about the monstrous thing she had done years ago? The silence between them grew, and with it, the gap between the woman Sarah had become and the girl who had made the hardest choice of her life. It felt like a secret too dark to share, too heavy to lift, but Sarah couldn't keep it hidden forever. One evening, when the weight of her emotions became unbearable, she sat up late in bed, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating her thoughts. She had to know, she had to understand what had happened to Adam. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that the past had stayed in the past. With trembling hands, she opened her laptop and began to search for information. Her eyes scanned the news archives, social media, any source she could find that might give her a hint about what happened to Adam after that night. The search felt like a betrayal to Jake, but she couldn't stop herself. As Sarah dug deeper, a knot formed in her stomach. There was no mention of Adam in any of the articles. But then, she found something. A small news snippet about a boy who had been found abandoned years ago and later adopted by a loving family. The boy had grown up in the foster care system, but the article made no mention of his biological parents, no mention of the woman who had left him behind. The discovery hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. That boy was Adam. He had been adopted by another family, given a new name, a new life, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She wasn't sure what it was, but deep inside she could feel that Adam wasn't completely whole, that somehow, despite the love he'd received from his new family, something was missing, and that something was her, the mother who had abandoned him. Her heart ached. She could never take back the pain she had caused him. But maybe, just maybe, she could make things right. She had to try. She couldn't live with the guilt any longer. She had to know if Adam was okay, if he was happy, if he had ever thought about her, about the woman who had given him life and then thrown it away. But the more she searched, the more questions arose. How would she find him? What would she say? Could he ever forgive her? Could she even forgive herself? Sarah wasn't sure. All she knew was that she had to find him. She couldn't let the years of guilt define her any longer. She had to face her past, no matter how painful it was. She couldn't run away anymore. But first, she had to confront Jake. She had to tell him the truth. It was the only way to begin to fix what was broken, and that truth, as terrifying as it was, could destroy everything she had built. As Sarah sat in the dark, her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to do next. Her life was on the verge of unraveling. Everything she had worked so hard to keep hidden was now exposed, and there was no turning back. The tension between her and Jake had already begun to strain their relationship, and now, with the truth threatening to come out, Sarah's world was about to change forever. The days following Sarah's discovery felt like a blur, her mind constantly racing, unable to settle. She couldn't stop thinking about Adam. The haunting image of his face, frozen in that photograph, kept replaying in her head, a constant reminder of the pain she had caused. She couldn't ignore it any longer. She had spent so many years trying to bury her past, but now it was impossible to pretend it didn't exist. Jake noticed the change in her. He wasn't blind to the way she'd withdrawn from him, how the warmth between them had cooled. He tried to engage her, to find out what was going on in her mind, but every time he asked, Sarah simply smiled and changed the subject. She didn't want to lie to him, but she couldn't bear to tell him the truth either. What could she say? How could she explain the horrors of her past, the things she had tried so hard to forget? That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Sarah found herself standing in front of the mirror in the dim light of their bedroom. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked older now, tired, worn down by the weight of her secret. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and for the first time in years, she saw the truth in her eyes. She had never truly healed. The past had always been with her, lingering in the background, waiting to resurface. She ran a hand over her stomach, a silent gesture to the child she had once carried, the child she had abandoned, the child who was now, perhaps, somewhere out there in the world, living a life that didn't involve her. Sarah's heart squeezed in her chest. She had failed him. She had failed Adam in the worst way possible. The guilt gnawed at her, but there was no turning back. She had to find him. She needed to know if he was okay, if he was living a life filled with love. But the more she thought about it, the more the questions swirled in her mind. Was he angry? Did he hate her for what she had done? Could he ever forgive her? The thought of facing him terrified her, but the thought of not trying was worse. She couldn't leave things the way they were, with that unfinished chapter hanging between them. The following morning she woke up early, her mind already set on her plan. She needed to find Adam. She needed to know if he had any questions about his past, about her. She needed to know if there was any chance of a relationship, any way to make up for what she had done. But there was one obstacle she couldn't ignore: Jake. How could she look him in the eyes and tell him the truth? How could she explain the secret that had haunted her for so long, a secret that had nothing to do with him, yet everything to do with their future together? As Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup, she thought about the path ahead. She had to be honest with him. But how would he take it? Would he understand? Would he stay by her side after everything she had done? She shook her head, the uncertainty too overwhelming. Jake had been her rock, the one person who had accepted her flaws and loved her despite them. But this was different. This was a secret so dark, so painful, that she couldn't imagine anyone forgiving her. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She turned, startled, her heart racing. When she opened it, she was met with the sight of Jake standing there, his eyes searching hers, waiting for some explanation. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked gently, his voice full of concern. "I've been trying to get through to you, but you've been distant. I know something's wrong." Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest. She didn't know what to say, how to explain it. She took a step back, inviting him inside, but her hands shook as she closed the door behind him. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that's been eating at me for years." Jake raised an eyebrow, concern deepening. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "What's going on, Sarah? You know you can tell me anything." But Sarah couldn't bring herself to speak. How could she say it? How could she explain the unthinkable? Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she found the photo of Jake with Adam in the background. She held it up for him to see. Jake looked at the photo, confusion flickering across his face. "What is this? Who is that kid?" Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. That's my son," she said softly, her voice cracking. "The son I abandoned when I was just a teenager." Jake's face went pale. He stared at the photo, then back at her, his expression one of shock and disbelief. "Your son? You had a child?" She nodded, unable to look him in the eye. I was 17. I had no support, no one to help me. I couldn't keep him, so I left him under a bridge. I thought it was the only way. Jake's hand dropped from hers, and he took a step back, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Faz, you abandoned your own child. Sarah, how could you? I didn't know what else to do, Sarah interrupted, her voice rising, desperate. I was scared. I was so young. I didn't have anyone to turn to. I thought he'd be better off without me, but I've regretted it every single day since. I never stopped thinking about him. And now, I found out he's been adopted. He's out there somewhere living a life without me, and I need to know if he's okay. I need to make things right. Jake stood motionless, his eyes locked on her. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Sarah could feel the walls closing in, the weight of her confession suffocating her. After what felt like an eternity, Jake finally spoke, his voice cold and distant. I can't believe this, Sarah. You've been hiding this from me all this time. How do you expect me to just understand this? I never wanted to hurt you, Jake, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't think you'd ever forgive me. Jake shook his head, his face hardening. I don't even know who you are anymore. The words stung, more than she could have imagined. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. Her worst fear had come true. Jake was slipping away from her, but there was no turning back. She had to find Adam, no matter what it cost her. As the silence stretched between them, Sarah knew that the road ahead would be long, painful, and filled with uncertainty. But she couldn't ignore it anymore. She couldn't live in the past forever. The truth was out, and now there would be no going back. The days after her confession felt like an endless storm. Sarah's heart was heavy, her mind consumed with guilt and fear of what might happen next. The truth was out, but the silence that followed felt more suffocating than any secret she had kept for years. Jake had pulled away from her, his warmth replaced by a coldness that she couldn't ignore. He wasn't cruel, but the distance between them was palpable, and every word they exchanged felt like a painful reminder of the truth she had laid bare. She spent her days in a haze, her mind occupied with the image of Adam's face, the boy she had left behind, the one she had thought about every day for the past decade. She had no idea where he was, what his life had been like, or if he even remembered her. She only knew one thing: she had to find him. She had to make things right, even if it meant losing everything in the process. Jake's reaction had been devastating. His disbelief, his hurt, his anger, it all stung more than Sarah had expected. She had hoped for understanding, for some sign that he would stand by her, even in the face of such a painful truth. But instead, there had been nothing but silence. He had retreated into himself, unsure of how to process the bombshell she had dropped on him. She couldn't blame him. She couldn't expect him to simply forgive her. What she had done was unforgivable in so many ways, but she hadn't expected him to pull away completely, to become a stranger in her own home. She needed answers. She needed closure, for both herself and for Adam. The search for him consumed her. Every waking moment spent looking for any trace of the son she had abandoned. One afternoon, Sarah sat in front of her laptop, the soft hum of the computer the only sound in the quiet apartment. She had been scouring every possible source, news stories, social media, anything that could give her even a glimpse of Adam. It wasn't until she stumbled upon a blog post that something shifted. The post was written by a woman who worked at a local adoption agency. The woman had been involved in the adoption of children from the foster care system, and her words resonated deeply with Sarah. She spoke about the challenges children face when they're abandoned or given up for adoption, and the long-lasting effects it had on their sense of identity. Sarah felt an overwhelming wave of guilt wash over her as she read. She knew firsthand the pain of feeling abandoned, of having no one to turn to, but she had never stopped to consider the depth of the emotional scars that Adam must have carried with him. She needed to find him, but it wasn't just about fixing her mistake. It was about understanding the pain she had caused him, about seeing him as more than just a ghost from her past. The blog post gave her a lead, a contact at a local agency that helped trace children and reunite them with their biological parents. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, uncertainty gnawing at her. She had already done so much damage, so much wrong, but this was the only path she could take now, the only way forward. She dialed the number. When the voice on the other end of the line answered, Sarah hesitated. She had always been good at pretending. At pretending she had everything under control. But now, with the woman on the other end of the line waiting for her response, Sarah found herself at a loss for words. "Hello?" the woman asked again, her voice kind. I need help," Sarah finally managed to say, her voice shaky. "I'm trying to find my son. I gave him up for adoption years ago, and I need to know where he is. I need to know that he's okay." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a soft sigh. "I understand. It's never easy trying to reconnect after all this time, but I can help you. We'll start the process, and we'll see what we can find." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. She didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. Relief that she was finally taking a step towards something that could heal the wounds of her past, but fear that the path ahead might only lead to more heartbreak. I just need to know he's okay," Sarah whispered, the weight of her words settling in. "I need to know he's happy." The woman on the phone was silent for a moment, her words gentle but firm. "I'll start the search, Sarah. We'll do what we can. But remember, this process takes time. It may take longer than you expect." "I understand," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." After hanging up, Sarah sat in silence for a long time. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: hope, guilt, fear, and sadness all tangled together. She had taken the first step, but what if it wasn't enough? What if Adam didn't want to meet her? What if he didn't remember her? What if he hated her? The questions swirled in her mind, but there was one thing she knew for sure. She couldn't undo the past. The only thing she could do was try to make it right. But as Sarah sat there, a small part of her began to wonder if it was too late. Later that evening, Jake came home from work. Sarah heard the door open and close, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. She didn't turn to face him. She didn't know if she was ready to look him in the eye yet. His presence in the room only amplified the distance between them. She heard him sigh, his voice tentative. "Sarah, we need to talk." She didn't respond at first. What could she say? What was left to say? The truth was out. The damage was done. Their relationship was hanging by a thread. Finally, Sarah stood, slowly turning to face him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the hurt she had caused him with her secret. "I know you're angry," she said, her voice barely audible. "And I understand, but I had to do this. I had to try. I can't just pretend that everything's fine when it's not." Jake didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, his face unreadable. For a long moment, the silence stretched between them, both of them trapped in the weight of their unspoken words. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah," Jake finally said, his voice low and heavy with emotion. I don't know." Her heart broke as the words hit her, but she knew they were the truth. She had no right to ask for forgiveness. She had to find Adam, and she had to face whatever the outcome would be. But in that moment, Sarah realized something. She was no longer just searching for Adam. She was searching for herself, too. Sarah had spent the next few days walking through a haze, trying to convince herself that the decision she had made to seek Adam out after all these years was the right one. But every time she saw Jake, every time their eyes met, she was reminded of the fracture in their relationship, the painful rift that seemed to grow wider with each passing day. She couldn't blame him for pulling away, though it didn't stop the ache in her chest. The guilt felt unbearable. Jake's anger was a constant presence. Even when he didn't speak, he would sit beside her in silence, the tension thick between them, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder how long this could go on. How long could they live in the same house, so close yet so far apart? The guilt gnawed at her, but what could she do? She had done the unthinkable, and now there was no going back. At night she lay in bed, the soft glow of the moon illuminating the space around her, her mind racing. The woman from the adoption agency had contacted her a few days ago to let her know that the search for Adam was underway. They had found a few leads, but it would take time she couldn't afford to wait. The days stretched before her like an endless eternity. The silence in the house felt louder now. She couldn't escape the awareness of the brokenness between her and Jake. Their conversations were short, cold. His hurt was so palpable, it felt like a tangible wall between them, one that Sarah couldn't break down, no matter how hard she tried. Each day she wondered if there would be a moment when he would look at her and see her as the woman she had become, and not the scared teenager who made a choice that ruined everything. She wanted to fix things, to make it right, but what did that even mean? How could she fix something so broken? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from the adoption agency. She had almost forgotten about it in her fog of guilt and tension with Jake. Her hands were shaking as she opened the message, her eyes scanning the brief text. "We have located a possible address for Adam. He is living in a small town about 2 hours away. I'll send the details soon. Please let us know if you'd like to proceed with contacting him." Sarah's heart stopped for a moment, the words sinking in slowly. Adam was out there. He was living, breathing, maybe even thinking about her. The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. She had thought about him every single day since the day she left him behind. But now, knowing he was real, that he was somewhere she could find, it felt overwhelming. What would she say to him? What could she possibly say to him after everything she had done? Would he even want to meet her? The thought of finally seeing him, of holding him again after all these years, brought both a sense of longing and dread. She wasn't sure she could bear it. Could he forgive her? Would he be angry? Would he even remember her? Would he see her as the woman who had abandoned him, or the mother who had always loved him from afar? She texted back almost immediately, her fingers trembling as she typed, "Yes, please, let me know how I can move forward." Then, as quickly as the moment of urgency came, doubt crept in. She glanced toward the bedroom where Jake was, lying in the dark, and the sadness in her heart deepened. It wasn't just Adam's forgiveness she was afraid of, it was Jake's too. She had already lost so much. What if she lost him as well? What if in the end the pursuit of fixing her past led to the destruction of her present? Jake didn't come home until late the next evening. His work had kept him out, and Sarah hadn't seen him much that day, which only deepened the distance. When he finally walked through the door, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, her eyes glued to the screen. She had been looking at Adam's possible address over and over, unable to stop herself from imagining what it would be like to actually go there, to knock on a door and face the boy who had once been her son. But with every passing moment, her doubts grew. Was this the right thing to do? Could she really walk away from Jake, from the life she had built, with the hope of fixing something that had been broken for so long? Jake didn't greet her at first. He simply stood in the doorway, his gaze settling on her face. She hadn't realized how tense she was until she saw the familiar flicker of hurt in his eyes. His jaw tightened. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft but firm, "we need to talk." She nodded, her throat dry. She hadn't wanted to confront this, hadn't wanted to force the words into the open, but she knew it was inevitable. She couldn't run from this forever. Jake walked over to the table and sat down across from her. He didn't look at her for a long time, his eyes focused on the table between them. The air felt thick, heavy with everything that hadn't been said. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, breaking the silence, "about you, about us." Sarah couldn't bring herself to speak. She just watched him, waiting for him to continue, unsure of what he would say next. "And I don't know if I can do this anymore," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep living in this lie." Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest, like a physical blow. The words stung, more than she thought possible. She knew this day was coming. She had known all along that her secret would cost her, but to hear it from Jake, to hear him say that he didn't know if he could continue, was like a knife twisting in her heart. "I never meant to hurt you," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I thought I was protecting you, protecting us. But now I see how much I've ruined. I see what I've done, and I don't know how to fix it." Jake finally looked up, meeting her eyes. His expression was hard to read. He was angry, yes, but there was something else there too, something more complicated. His gaze softened, but just for a moment. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah," he said, the words coming out more slowly than she expected. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did." Sarah's heart broke all over again, broke all, and she lowered her gaze to the table, unable to meet his eyes any longer. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah spoke again. "I have to find him, Jake," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have to make it right. I know I can't fix everything, but I have to try. I can't live with the regret anymore." Jake's face twisted in frustration, his hands balling into fists on the table. "And what about us, Sarah? What about me? Am I just supposed to sit here while you go off and try to find some kind of redemption for yourself? What about this life we've built?" "I don't know," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what's going to happen with us, but I can't keep pretending this isn't tearing me apart." And with that, the distance between them seemed to widen even more. Sarah had made her choice. She had no idea what the future held, or if she would ever get Jake back, but she couldn't ignore the call to find Adam, the boy she had abandoned, the boy who had always been her son. As Sarah sat there facing Jake's pain and her own, she realized that sometimes you had to face the darkness of your past before you could ever hope to find any light. And maybe, just maybe, she would find the strength to make things right. But first she had to face Adam. Sarah could hardly sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the images of Adam's face haunted her. He was out there, somewhere, living a life without her, a life that she had failed to be a part of. The weight of the past pressed down on her chest, and she could barely breathe. The pain of what she had done, the guilt, the shame, was almost suffocating. But it wasn't just that. It was the reality of what was to come, the confrontation, The meeting. Would he hate her? Would he see her as the monster she felt like? Or would he somehow be able to forgive her? The clock on the wall ticked away the hours, each passing second another reminder that time was slipping away. She had to act, and yet, every time she thought about it, her resolve wavered. The distance between her and Jake seemed to grow with each passing day, and now as her focus shifted to finding Adam, she wondered if she was too late to save anything, to save herself from her own mistakes. She turned to her phone again, checking the message from the adoption agency. There it was. The address. It was real. Adam was real. The piece of her that she had discarded so many years ago was still out there, still breathing, still living. But was he angry? Was he happy? Did he ever think about her? Or had he completely erased her from his memory? The question gnawed at her. She sat up in bed, her fingers tracing the edge of the screen. It was 2 hours away, the small town where Adam was living now. She had the address. She had everything she needed to find him. But did she have the courage to face him? Jake's voice had lingered in her mind all day. I don't know if I can forgive you. Those words, sharp and final, cut deep. The pain of his rejection was something she hadn't fully prepared for. She had expected anger. She had expected pain. But she hadn't expected that. Jake's face, his distant eyes, the hurt in his voice, it all weighed on her like a boulder. She couldn't escape it. She wasn't sure if she could survive it, but she couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. She couldn't keep living in a house where the silence was louder than any argument they'd ever had. She had to make a choice. Her phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. A new message from the adoption agency. We have a contact for you to reach Adam's family. They've agreed to a meeting. Please let us know how you would like to proceed. Her heart raced. A meeting. The words hung in the air, taunting her. She couldn't just show up, could she? Could she knock on the door of a family that had raised her son, a family that had no idea who she really was? The idea terrified her, but at the same time, it gave her a flicker of hope, a sliver of a chance to make things right. Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She didn't want to think about the consequences. She didn't want to think about what might happen if things went wrong. She only knew that this was her only shot, her last chance to fix what she had broken. She typed a quick reply to the agency. Please, set it up. I'm ready. The next morning, Sarah drove to the small town. The drive was long, stretching out the tension in her body with every mile. The closer she got, the harder it became to breathe. She had no plan, no idea what she would say. She had prepared for years to meet Adam again, but now that the moment was finally here, she felt completely unprepared. What would she say? How would she explain herself? Was there even a way to explain what she had done? The streets of the town were small and quiet. The houses were old but well-maintained, with white picket fences and flower gardens in full bloom. The image of Adam as a child, the small, helpless boy she had left behind, floated through her mind. She wondered how much of him was still that boy, how much of the child he had been had carried over into the young man he had become. The address led her to a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of the town. She pulled up in front of a modest house, the kind of place that looked warm and safe, the kind of place where a child might grow up happy. It was a nice house, too nice for a boy like Adam, Sarah thought, but maybe that was the point. He deserved better than what she could have given him back then. Her hands were trembling as she turned off the engine. She sat in the car for a few moments looking at the house. It seemed so normal. Everything was normal. There was a life here, a life that she had abandoned. She didn't know how long she sat there, but finally she took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and got out of the car. Each step she took toward the front door felt like a small eternity. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her breath shallow as she stood at the door, hand hovering over the knocker. She hesitated. The door opened before she could knock, and a woman stood there, smiling warmly, though the smile quickly faded when she saw Sarah's face. The woman's expression shifted from friendly to wary. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle but cautious. "I'm looking for Adam," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm his mother." The woman blinked, a moment of confusion crossing her face before recognition set in. "Oh, I see," she said slowly, stepping back from the door. "Come in. We should talk." The next few minutes felt like they stretched on forever. Sarah was led into a small, cozy living room where she was offered a seat. The woman, whose name Sarah learned was Maria, sat across from her, her eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "How long has it been?" Maria asked softly. 16 years, Sarah replied, her voice cracking. "I gave him up when he was just a baby. I wasn't ready to be a mother." Maria nodded slowly. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been." The conversation was tentative at first. Maria told Sarah a little about Adam, how he had adjusted to life with them, how he had been a quiet, thoughtful child. She spoke about how Adam had always wondered about his birth mother, though he had never pushed. He had always been curious, but he also understood the pain that came with searching for someone who had disappeared from his life. "He's grown into a fine young man," Maria said, her voice filled with pride. "But I know it's been hard for him. Even though he's never said it directly, I know he feels that there's something missing." Sarah's heart clenched. She wanted to tell Maria everything. She wanted to explain, to apologize for the hurt she had caused, but she couldn't find the words. What could she say? There were no words that could take back what she had done. Maria's eyes softened. "He's upstairs. He doesn't know you're here. He doesn't know why you came. But maybe it's time he did." Terror gripped Sarah's chest. She had thought about this moment for so long, but now that it was here, she felt like she might fall apart. She was about to face him, the son she had abandoned, the son who had somehow made it this far without her. Maria stood and walked toward the stairs, calling up softly, "Adam, you have a visitor." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. The moment had arrived. The door at the top of the stairs opened, and a tall young man stepped into view. Adam. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was the boy she had left behind. But now he was a man, a stranger, yet somehow the familiarity was there. She had never thought it would be this hard, this painful. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. But then slowly his eyes softened. "Mom," Adam said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. And in that moment Sarah realized this was just the beginning. The word "Mom" hung in the air, fragile, uncertain, like a breath held too long. Sarah's heart stopped for a moment, and she felt as if time itself had paused. Adam, her son, was standing in front of her. The boy she had left behind, the child she had abandoned, was now a young man. His face was still familiar, though it had matured, carrying the marks of the years she had missed. His eyes were the same deep brown she remembered, filled with curiosity and a quiet pain. But it wasn't just his eyes that hit her. It was the way he stood, the way he carried himself. There was a certain vulnerability in him that Sarah hadn't expected to see. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment his whole life, waiting for the answers to the questions he had been too afraid to ask. For a long moment no one spoke. The silence between them was deafening. Sarah wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. What could she possibly say after all these years, after abandoning him, leaving him with strangers, with a family who had raised him in the way she had failed to do? Adam took a step forward, his gaze fixed on her, and for the first time she noticed the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched by his sides, as if he was fighting to keep his emotions in check. "I wasn't sure if you'd show up," Adam said quietly, his voice steady but laced with a hint of something like uncertainty or maybe even fear. "But I guess I should have known you would." Sarah's breath caught in her chest. She could feel the weight of his words settle on her, and her guilt, already crushing, grew heavier. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am so sorry, Adam. I can't even begin to explain." Adam shook his head slightly, interrupting her before she could continue. "You don't have to explain. I've spent my whole life wondering, why you left me, why you weren't there. But I don't know. I guess I never really thought I'd get to meet you." The sadness in his voice was like a punch to Sarah's gut. She could hear the years of longing, the years of questions he had carried with him, and she felt the weight of it all, felt it in her bones. He wasn't angry. He wasn't screaming at her for abandoning him. No, he was just empty, and that was worse than anything. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sarah continued, her words coming in a rush. "I don't expect anything from you, but I needed to see you. I needed to know that you were okay, that you were happy." Adam's expression softened, just a little, but his eyes didn't leave hers. There was still something guarded in his gaze, a hesitance to fully let her in. He wasn't ready to open the door to her just yet. She could see that. "I'm not sure what I was expecting either," Adam said quietly, his voice still calm but tinged with something deep, something that hurt. "I thought maybe you'd be different, but then I guess I wasn't sure who you were anymore." Sarah nodded, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. He was right. He didn't know her anymore. She wasn't the same scared teenager who had left him all those years ago. But even though she had changed, even though she had spent years regretting her decision, she still felt like a stranger to him, and he to her. "I'm not the person I was back then," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I've spent so many years trying to make up for what I did, but I know that's never going to change what happened. I can't go back. I can't undo it." Adam took another step forward, his eyes softening just a little more. I know, he said almost too softly for Sarah to hear. I don't want to change the past. I wanted to know why you left me. I wanted to know who you were, why you did what you did. The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her with such force that Sarah felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. He didn't want to change the past. He just wanted answers. And there it was, the heart of everything. Adam had never truly understood. He had never fully understood why she left, why she made that decision. He had carried that burden all his life, and now he was standing in front of her, asking her for something she couldn't fully give. Adam, I was scared, Sarah whispered, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I was so scared. I was just a kid myself, and I thought you'd be better off without me. I thought if I left you somewhere safe, you'd have a better life than I could have given you. Adam was quiet for a moment, and for a second Sarah thought he might walk away, that he might turn his back on her forever, but then he stepped closer, his eyes still holding hers, searching for something she couldn't name. I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah, he said quietly, his voice full of something Sarah couldn't quite place. But I don't hate you. I don't think I can hate you. I don't know what to feel, but I'm not angry. I just don't know what to do with all this. Sarah nodded slowly, trying to breathe through the ache in her chest. I understand. I didn't come here to force anything. I just needed to see you, to know that you're okay. Adam looked down at his feet for a moment, his hands still clenched by his sides, and then, after what seemed like an eternity, he looked back up at her. I guess it's enough that you're here, he said softly. I don't know what's going to happen next, but it's enough that you're here. And in that moment, Sarah felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected. Hope. A small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could begin to rebuild. She didn't know how or when, but she felt it. There was a chance. Maria, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped into the room, her face soft with understanding. She smiled at Sarah, offering a quiet nod. I think that's all either of you need right now. Just time. Sarah didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know how she would ever be able to earn Adam's forgiveness, or Jake's for that matter. But she knew this. This was the beginning. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. I'll give you both some space, Maria said, stepping back toward the hallway. But if you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. Adam and Sarah stood in silence, both of them processing everything that had been said. The weight of the past still loomed over them, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a small sense of peace. Adam wasn't angry. He wasn't pushing her away, and that was enough to begin the long, hard journey toward healing. As Maria disappeared into the hallway, Sarah and Adam stood together, the distance between them not quite as vast as it had been before. There was no grand reunion, no sweeping embrace, but there was something more important, understanding. And that, Sarah realized, was where it all had to begin. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and tentative steps forward. Sarah couldn't help but replay the moments from her meeting with Adam over and over in her mind. The way he had looked at her, the way his voice had trembled with the weight of everything unsaid between them. It lingered in her thoughts like an echo she couldn't shake, but there was a part of her that felt a small flicker of hope. Adam hadn't rejected her. He hadn't slammed the door on her past. He had merely allowed her in. Just a crack, but enough for her to see the possibility of something more. The next morning she woke up early, a feeling of resolve settling over her as the sun streamed through the window. She couldn't undo the past. She couldn't fix all of the pain and the mistakes she had made, but she could try. She could start with Adam. The house was still quiet when she made her way downstairs, the stillness between her and Jake as palpable as it had been for the last few weeks. Every glance, every word they exchanged felt like an unspoken weight. Sarah knew that her decision to search for Adam had deepened the rift between them, and she wasn't sure how to repair that. She had hurt him, and no amount of explanations could take that away. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee, lost in thought. Sarah hesitated for a moment before approaching him. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, but he didn't say anything. The space between them felt endless. I'm going to keep seeing Adam, Sarah said softly, her voice a little shaky. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make up for the time I lost. Jake's face remained unreadable, but his jaw tightened slightly, a flicker of emotion passing through his eyes. I don't know if I can keep going. Sarah, he said quietly, his words weighing heavily in the air. I don't know if I can just watch you walk away from us, from everything we've built, to fix something that's been broken for so long. Sarah felt the sting of his words, but she couldn't back down. She couldn't pretend that this wasn't the path she needed to follow. I never meant to hurt you, Jake, but I can't ignore this anymore. I have to make things right with him. I have to try. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair, frustration lining his features. I get it, Sarah. I do. But it feels like you're choosing him over me, over us, and I don't know how to deal with that. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. He was right to be hurt, but Sarah knew that she couldn't ignore the call of her past any longer. It was a bitter, heartbreaking truth, but she couldn't ignore Adam's presence in her life, not anymore. I'm not choosing him over you, she whispered, her voice filled with the rawness of everything she had been holding in. I'm choosing to fix what I broke. I never wanted to hurt you, Jake, but this is something I have to do. Jake stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, his gaze intense. And what if you can't fix it? What if Adam doesn't want anything to do with you? What happens to us then? The question hung between them, sharp and painful. Sarah didn't have an answer. She didn't know what would happen if Adam didn't want a relationship with her. She didn't know what would happen if Jake couldn't forgive her. But she had to try, for her sake, for Adam's sake. I don't know, Sarah admitted, her voice small. But I can't live with myself if I don't try. Jake's eyes softened, but the hurt was still there. I can't promise I'll be here if you go down this road, Sarah, he said quietly. I don't know if I can watch you walk away from me again. The words cut through her like a blade, but she understood. She knew the pain she had caused. She couldn't fix it all in one moment. She couldn't force him to forgive her. I'm sorry, Jake, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant for any of this to happen. He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. For a long moment they stood there, both of them caught in the weight of everything they couldn't say. Later that afternoon, Sarah drove back to the small town where Adam lived. Her heart was pounding as she approached the house, unsure of what to expect, what to say, or how this meeting would go. When she rang the doorbell, her stomach twisted with nerves. She had no idea what Adam's reaction would be this time. Would he be open to seeing her again? Or had the small crack she had made in their relationship already begun to close? Maria answered the door, offering Sarah a warm, welcoming smile. Come in, Sarah. Adam's upstairs. He's been waiting to see you. Sarah's hands shook as she stepped inside. This was it. This was the moment that would determine everything. She was led to the same living room where they had first met, and Adam was sitting on the couch, his head turned slightly as he heard her footsteps. When he looked at her, there was a mixture of curiosity and something else, something softer, maybe even tentative. Hey, Adam said, standing up slowly. You came back. Sarah smiled weakly, her heart in her throat. I didn't want to leave it like that. I didn't want to leave things unfinished. Adam nodded, taking a step toward her. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about why you left. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand, but I get that you were just trying to do what you thought was best for me. Sarah swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to overtake her. I don't expect you to forgive me, Adam. I don't even expect you to want to have a relationship with me, but I just needed to say that I'm sorry. I was a scared kid, and I made a horrible decision. I can't undo it, but I can try to be here now. Adam studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, and Sarah held her breath, waiting for him to say something, anything. I'm not sure what this means, Adam said finally, his voice steady. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I don't want you to go away again. I don't know if I'm ready to trust you, but I don't want to shut you out. A wave of relief washed over Sarah, but it was only temporary. There was so much more to this journey, so much more to rebuild, but for now this was enough. Adam wasn't rejecting her. He wasn't closing the door on her completely. I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah said quietly, her voice full of emotion. I'll be here, I won't go away. Adam nodded, his gaze softening. I don't know what this looks like, but maybe we can figure it out. And in that moment, Sarah realized that they had taken the first step. It wasn't going to be easy, it wasn't going to be perfect, but they had a chance. And that was all she needed. As Sarah left the house that day, her heart felt both lighter and heavier. She didn't know what the future held, but she was willing to face it, no matter how painful. She had started the process of healing for both herself and Adam, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for forgiveness. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that clung to her every step, even as she made her way back to the car. The afternoon with Adam had been emotionally overwhelming, yet there was a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. They had taken a small, fragile step toward something that resembled healing, but she knew it wasn't enough to fix everything. The road ahead would be long, uncertain, and full of challenges, but for the first time in years, she felt like there was hope. As she sat in the driver's seat, staring out the windshield, Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. It wasn't just physical, it was a weariness that ran deeper than anything she could explain. She had spent so much of her life running from her past, trying to bury it beneath layers of guilt, regret, and fear. But now, here she was, face to face with it, and Adam, her son, a boy she had abandoned, a boy who had grown into a young man who was still processing the weight of that decision. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. She drove back to the house in a daze, her mind still reeling from everything that had transpired. When she arrived, Jake's car was parked in the driveway, and for the first time in a while, she felt a knot tighten in her chest. She hadn't seen him much over the past few days. He'd been distant, and she had retreated into her own thoughts, consumed with the urgency of finding Adam. But now, as she walked through the front door, she knew things between them had changed irrevocably. Jake was sitting on the couch, his posture stiff, his eyes focused on the TV, though he wasn't really watching. Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering her thoughts, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them, the weight of everything, the truth about Adam, the distance between them, the pain of their unraveling relationship felt suffocating. "Jake," Sarah began softly, her voice hesitant. Jake didn't look up. He had heard her, but he wasn't ready to meet her gaze just yet. "I went to see Adam today," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some grand reunion or anything like that, but he's not angry with me. He's not shutting me out. He's willing to try." Jake finally looked up at her, his expression unreadable. His eyes were dark with something, anger, disappointment, maybe a mix of both. Sarah could feel the tension building between them, thick and heavy, and she knew that the next words could either break them apart further or begin to rebuild what had been lost. "Do you feel better now?" Jake asked quietly, his voice edged with bitterness. "Do you feel like everything's okay now that you've seen him?" Sarah winced, the harshness in his tone hitting her like a slap. "No," she admitted, taking a step closer to him. "I don't feel okay, but I'm doing the best I can. I can't go back and change what I did. Jake, I can't undo the past, but I need to try, for him, for me." Jake stood up abruptly, walking over to the window, his back to her. Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was trying to hold himself together. "I get it, Sarah," Jake said, his voice low, controlled. "I really do. But you have to understand, it's not just about him. It's about us too. You've been so focused on fixing things with him, but what about us? What about what we've built together? I can't just pretend like this doesn't hurt." Sarah's heart clenched. She knew it wasn't just about Adam. She had known that bringing him into her life again would tear things apart. She didn't know how to fix it, how to make it right for Jake too. She had already lost so much, and now she was on the verge of losing him as well, but she didn't know how to make him understand. "I don't want to lose you, Jake," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this. I had to do this. I had to try to fix the mistake I made. I can't live with the guilt of not doing anything. But I'm sorry, I don't want to lose you too." Jake turned around slowly, his eyes dark and full of pain. He stepped toward her, closing the distance between them, and for a moment Sarah thought he might reach out, might hold her the way he used to. But instead, he just stood there looking at her with a mixture of hurt and resignation. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Jake said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep watching you chase after something from your past while we're both falling apart." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she felt the air rush out of her lungs. She wanted to tell him that she hadn't wanted any of this. She wanted to scream that she had tried, that she had always tried to be the person he needed, but all of that seemed so meaningless now. The truth was, she had made choices that had led them here. She had chosen to confront her past, to face the consequences of her actions, and in doing so she had ripped their future apart. "I can't change what's happened," Sarah whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I can't fix everything, but I need you to understand. I need to know that you're willing to fight for us. I don't want to give up on you. I don't want to give up on us." Jake's face softened just slightly, but the sadness was still there. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight as he struggled with his emotions. Sarah could see the pain in his eyes, and she knew that the damage had been done. Maybe it wasn't too late for them, but it felt like it was. "I don't know, Sarah," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can keep fighting when I feel like I'm losing you. You've already made your choice. And I don't think I can keep waiting for you to come back." Sarah's chest tightened with the crushing weight of his words. She didn't know how to fix this. She didn't know how to make him see that she hadn't chosen Adam over him. She hadn't chosen the past over their future, but she didn't know how to convince him of that. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Jake nodded slowly, his face distant. "I know you are, but sometimes sorry isn't enough." The words stung more than she ever thought they would, and as Jake turned away from her, walking slowly toward the door, Sarah felt the finality of it settle in. He was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She stood there, frozen, as the door clicked shut behind him. And in that moment, Sarah realized the full weight of the choice she had made. She had chosen to face her past, to seek redemption, to try to make things right with Adam. But in doing so, she might have lost everything that mattered in her present. She didn't know if she could fix what was broken. She didn't know if she could make everything right. But all she knew was that she couldn't stop trying. And as she stood there, the silence around her felt like the only thing she could hold on to. Sarah sat in the quiet of the house, the weight of everything pressing down on her. Jake's absence felt like a shadow that followed her from room to room. She had spent so many years running from her past, and now facing it head-on, she was losing everything else she had fought to build. She had always been afraid of this moment, the moment when the past and the present collided, and now it was here, threatening to destroy everything. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, breaking the heavy silence. She glanced down and saw a message from the adoption agency. The words jumped out at her. "We've arranged a meeting with Adam tomorrow. He wants to talk more. Please confirm if you're available to meet." Sarah's heart raced as she read the message. A meeting, another chance to try and rebuild. Her mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. Was she doing the right thing? Was she destroying her relationship with Jake for a chance at redemption with Adam? Could she fix what was broken between them? She hadn't spoken to Jake since that afternoon, and it had been a crushing silence. He had walked away, leaving her in the same spot, unable to move forward, unable to go back. She had to make a decision. She couldn't keep living in this limbo. She couldn't keep hoping that things would magically fix themselves. Sarah stared at the phone screen for a long time, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She had already decided that she would go. She needed this. She needed to know Adam. She needed to be a part of his life, even if it was just a small part. She couldn't keep running from her mistakes. She needed closure, even if it was painful. With a deep breath, she typed her response, "Yes, I'll be there. Yes." The next morning, Sarah drove back to the small town. The car felt like a capsule, enclosing her in her thoughts. The hum of the engine, a constant reminder of the choices she had made. The road stretched ahead of her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on a path that led nowhere. Even if she saw Adam again, even if they tried to rebuild some kind of connection, would it ever be enough? Could she really repair the damage she had done all those years ago? When she arrived at the house, her hands trembled as she knocked on the door. Maria greeted her warmly, but with a slight hesitation in her eyes, as though she, too, felt the tension in the air. "Adam's in the living room," she said softly, stepping aside to let Sarah in. "He's expecting you." Sarah nodded, forcing a smile, though she didn't feel it. She followed Maria down the hall, her stomach tied in knots. As they entered the living room, Adam stood up from the couch, his expression neutral but his eyes searching, almost as if he were waiting for something. He looked older, more mature, but still, there was something about him that reminded Sarah of the boy she had left behind. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adam simply watched her, and Sarah took in the way he stood, the way he seemed to hold himself at a distance, as if unsure of what was supposed to happen next. "I'm here," Sarah said quietly, her voice unsteady. I wanted to see you again, to talk." Adam nodded slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," he said, his voice measured but carrying an emotion Sarah couldn't place. "I know you're trying to make things right, and I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I don't want to shut you out either. I want to understand." Sarah's heart clenched at his words. He was willing to try. That was something. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't expect anything except the chance to be a part of his life, even if it meant starting from scratch. "I never wanted to hurt you, Adam," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I know that doesn't change what I did, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've lived with that guilt every day." Adam didn't speak immediately. He simply looked at her, his face unreadable. It felt like an eternity before he finally broke the silence. "I don't hate you," Adam said softly, his voice filled with something almost gentle. "I've spent my life wondering, you know. What happened? Why you left me? And I guess part of me always thought you would come back. I didn't think I'd ever meet you like this. I didn't want to leave you," Sarah whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. "I was scared, and I thought you'd be better off without me, but I was wrong. I was so wrong." Adam stood still, his gaze fixed on her, and Sarah could see the complexity in his eyes. He wasn't angry, but there was a weight there, a burden he had carried for years, and she was just beginning to see it. "Maybe we can start over," Adam said finally, his voice quieter but with a hint of something that sounded almost like hope. "I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing to try." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she heard those words. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to be so understanding, so willing to try. She didn't know what this meant or where it would go, but for the first time, she felt like they were on the same page. She wasn't just the woman who abandoned him. She was a mother trying to make amends. And maybe, just maybe, Adam could see that. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I won't let you down again." Adam nodded, but he didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The air between them had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was standing on solid ground. As she left the house, Sarah felt the weight on her chest lift, just a little. The road ahead was still uncertain, but this was a start. She didn't know if it would be enough, if Adam could ever truly forgive her. But they had begun the journey, and that was more than she had ever hoped for. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Jake. "We need to talk." Sarah's heart sank. She didn't know if she was ready to face the fallout of her decisions, but she knew she had to. She couldn't keep running from the consequences of her actions. She couldn't lose him too. With a deep breath, Sarah typed a quick reply. "I'm on my way home." And as she pulled out of the driveway, heading back to the life she had left behind, she realized that no matter what happened next, she had taken a step forward. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was a beginning, and that was enough for now. The day had been a whirlwind of emotions. The relief of seeing Adam again, the fleeting sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different, had lifted Sarah's spirits for a moment. But as she drove back toward home, a heavy, suffocating tension settled in her chest. The message from Jake still lingered on her phone screen. "We need to talk." Those words had sent a chill down her spine when she first read them. She had avoided the confrontation, had buried the unease, but now she could no longer ignore it. She pulled into the driveway, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what to expect. The house was too quiet. Jake's car was parked outside, but she knew it wouldn't be the same. Things were different now. The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and she didn't know if they could ever repair the damage. When Sarah stepped inside, she saw Jake sitting at the kitchen table, his head down, his hands resting on the surface. He looked like he had been waiting for hours, lost in his thoughts, and his posture seemed heavier than it had ever been. He didn't look up at first. "Jake," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." He finally lifted his gaze to meet hers, his eyes tired and filled with something she couldn't quite read. His face was still familiar, but the warmth she once saw in it had faded, replaced by an emptiness that mirrored the emptiness in her own heart. He didn't speak immediately, just watched her, waiting for her to say something. "I went to see Adam," Sarah began, her voice breaking as she stood in the doorway, unsure of how to proceed. He's willing to try. He's not shutting me out." Jake's lips tightened, and his fingers drummed lightly on the table. "So you're going to keep doing this, aren't you? Keep running after him after the past? I guess I was right to be afraid." The bitterness in his voice stung. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like resignation, like he had already accepted that the woman he loved was slipping away from him, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. "I didn't want this to happen," Sarah said, taking a step forward. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jake. I didn't want to choose between you and him. But I can't just walk away from this. From him. From my past." Jake's gaze shifted, and for a moment Sarah thought she saw a flicker of the man she had once known, the man who would have held her in this moment, told her that everything would be okay. But instead he looked at her with something like defeat. "I'm not asking you to walk away from him," Jake said quietly, his voice hoarse. "But when did I become second place? When did I become the thing you put aside so easily? I've been here for you, Sarah. I've loved you through all the pain, and now I feel like I'm just a footnote in your story." The words hit her like a physical blow. She had tried so hard to balance everything, to make it work, to hold on to what she had with Jake while facing the demons of her past. But the truth was she had been too focused on fixing what she had broken with Adam, and in doing so she had neglected the one thing she had worked so hard to build. "Jake, Sarah started, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain the ache she felt, the pull of the past that wouldn't let her go? How could she make him understand that this wasn't about abandoning him, but about healing a wound that had festered inside her for so long? "I know you're hurting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I need you to understand. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not choosing Adam over you. I'm trying to fix something that's been broken for so long, and I don't know how to fix us. But I can't keep pretending that this doesn't matter, that I don't matter." Jake shook his head, standing up slowly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He paced for a moment, his eyes distant, like he was searching for something that wasn't there anymore. "I don't know, Sarah," Jake said, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can keep waiting for you to come back to me. I don't know if I can keep loving someone who's so focused on the past that she can't even see what's right in front of her. Sarah felt the words sink into her, a painful truth she had feared for so long. She had been so consumed with the idea of fixing things with Adam that she hadn't even noticed Jake slipping away, inch by painful inch. And now, as she stood in front of him, she realized that the love they had shared, the life they had built, was hanging by a thread. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said again, her voice breaking. "But I can't ignore this anymore, Jake. I have to fix what I broke, and I don't know if you can understand that, or if you can even forgive me. But I can't keep pretending I don't need to face the past." Jake didn't answer immediately. He stood there looking at her, his face unreadable. Then after a long pause, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can keep loving you the way I did, but maybe I need some time to figure that out. I don't know where we go from here." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood there, her heart breaking, her chest tight with the weight of the moment. She had known this was coming. She had known that facing the past would cost her, but hearing Jake say those words, hearing him admit that he didn't know if he could keep loving her, was like a gut punch. "I'll give you time," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I'll give you all the time you need, but please don't give up on us." Jake didn't respond, but Sarah could see the sadness in his eyes, the same sadness she felt inside herself. She didn't know if they could fix this. She didn't know if there was enough left to save, but she also knew that she couldn't keep pretending that she didn't have to face her past, even if it meant losing everything. As Jake turned and walked toward the door, Sarah felt the finality of it all sink in. She didn't know if he would come back. She didn't know if he could forgive her. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't undo what she had done, and she couldn't hide from the consequences any longer. The door clicked shut behind him, and Sarah stood there in the silence, wondering if it was too late to save anything. And as the reality of her choices hit her, Sarah realized that the only thing left to do now was move forward, even if it meant walking through the pain. Because sometimes all you could do was take the next step, no matter how uncertain or painful it might be. The journey wasn't over, and maybe, just maybe, that was all that mattered.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Comment where you're watching from, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel.